Right, it is now official. Finally, after a few days of speculation, I think we all saw it coming once all of the media reports started circulating, even after qualifying in China. That tells you just how much pressure Liam Lawson was under. But it is 9 a.m. and literally 10 minutes later, me and Tomo have jumped on the call to talk about this. Tomo, it's been a while since you were last on the channel. I think it was when Seb retired, and there was speculation about who was going to be in the Aston Martin of all things. So yeah, but a good one for you to come back on, because you've got a bit of history with Red Bull second drivers, YouTube, and making videos.
Yeah, we were literally saying before, like my very, very first YouTube video on my channel was when Gasly replaced Albon. And that was about over 5.5 years ago, closing in on 6, and it's still a problem that they can't solve. And like, I cannot believe we're doing it after 2 Grand Prix, Aldas. I like, no part of me thought that was gonna, even, I don't care how much it stunk the first 2 races, no part of me thought they'd pull him after 2. That's crazy.
Well, listen, let's get straight into it, because no messing about. Lawson's performances have been bad. Like, they have been worse. I think I said in a video of mine, even the staunchest of like Red Bull and Lawson, you know, his biggest critics who thought he was going to have a stinker, no one could have seen this coming, because I think the gap on average, you know, him and Max across 3 one-lap sessions has been something like 8/10 or something, which is just crazy. But, you know, I think it's worth mentioning 2 tracks that Lawson has never driven on. You know, massively tricky conditions in Australia. Even though they do drive on Albert Park in F2, he was gone by the time they started doing that. China again, sprint weekend. So when you talk about bad circumstances, bad situations, you know, it was always going to be tough for Lawson. You then throw the difficulties of the car as well. But I think it is fair to mention just how bad Lawson has been, because, you know, just to kind of have a rounded conversation, it has been really poor. I mean, qualifying last, I think it's twice. You know, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I thought, to be honest, I thought the sprint in China was actually really positive, because in, what was it, 18 laps, I forget specifically how many laps it was, he managed to like overtake maybe 5 or 6 cars. I thought, okay, you know, a little bit of light. I'm not saying light at the end of the tunnel, but I can see a glimmer of light. They made massive changes going into China, and it didn't work. You know, they were still messing about with the setup massively. You know, Christian Horner said they didn't just change the setup, they radically changed the setup from the sprint into the race, and it just didn't work, to be honest. So he has been very bad, and I think what's worrying is he's been behind the Saubers. I mean, it's one thing getting, let's say, knocked out in Q1, but it's definitely been even worse than I think anyone expected.
The thing is, it's really hard to measure this relatively, because you can argue that this Red Bull car is right now, competitiveness wise, relative to the field, the least competitive Red Bull Max has ever been given. Maybe, like, that's always been a top kind of 3, maybe 4 car at times, but this, like, it feels like it's the 4th quickest car. The fact that Max, you know, who will always extract the maximum, and obviously the conditions helped in Australia for him because he comes alive in the rain, but in China, like, that was, you know, just on pace, you know, finished 4th off the podium. And you look at how the whole field has contracted as well. Like, it is really difficult to know how much of this is the car, which again, Max is struggling with himself as well. There is a fundamental flaw there, and it's moved, you know, it's kept moving more and more on a knife edge, and they can't seem to find a way to extract any more performance without making that narrow operating window even narrower. You look at Liam's, I was looking at Liam's push laps in qualifying in Shanghai. Again, we've got such a small sample size that there's so, like, we can go that specific. And he was, basically, Liam was losing out on turn 1, the long right-hander, the long right-hander, and then that long right-hander before the back straight. Otherwise, he was like matching Max, and if not slightly quicker at times, throughout the rest of the circuit. It was those 2 specific corners that he was losing all the delta, and obviously they're such unique corners when you've got a really, really sharp car that doesn't inspire confidence. Confidence Max has built since he joined that team in 2016, right, over time. I don't know, it baffles me that, looking at the data, looking at, yes, it's not like Red Bull were in a sound position themselves. They had Flovies on that car right up until the end of testing. Like clearly there's something, and I don't know. It feels like a fool's errand, like switching out a driver again. I don't know about you. I mean, I'm sure we'll get onto it with Yuki, but it just feels like they're in a mess themselves, and almost Liam, it's kind of an easy scapegoat to make. That's honestly, part of me thinks that way.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely been scapegoated. Like, you've got to contextualize it under that he was hired based off his potential, not how good he was against Yuki over the past 2 seasons, because Yuki has been better. Like, that is just a fact. He was quicker, Yuki was quicker than him at the end of the season, but they picked up Liam based off his potential over the next, well, I was going to say over the next 1 or 2 years, not over the next 1 or 2 races. And this is what just baffles me, because when you pick up someone on potential alone, there is always going to be growing pains. We know the difficulties with the car. Max himself, like you said, Max has pointed out that this car is very, very tricky to drive. There clearly is performance out of it, but I think Max is a bit of a different situation. He clearly can get more out of that car than anyone on this planet. And to drop him after 2 races, he is being scapegoated as, he's being scapegoated essentially for the difficulties with the car.
Because Liam, like, you say Yuki was quicker, and he was. Like, over a lap in particular, you look at the average delta, and there was a gap, as there should be, by the way. Yuki, 4 seasons deep into that team. Liam, 11 Grand Prix spread over 2 years, right? That 1 lap pace should be there. Race pace, it was very, very comparable. And I mean, even remember, Suzuka is next weekend. In 23, when Liam originally jumped in to replace Ricciardo when he broke his hand, he overtook Yuki lap 1, great side by side, and stayed ahead of him and finished ahead of him. Liam was so. You can say Yuki was quicker, and you can say Yuki deserved it, right? And I get that. Yuki built his stock over time, and he definitely merited that opportunity more than anybody did. But Liam was close enough, and when again they compared them in the Red Bull, and they have the data. They have the data to make this, informed assessment. And for them to distrust Yuki so much, and even when Laurent Mekies and the Racing Bull side were propping him up, to now give him the opportunity and to take that opportunity away from Liam before, because Red Bull cannot sit here and confidently say, right, and they can't at the end of the season, Liam's definitely not the guy. Because I don't see any way Liam gets back into that Red Bull seat, regardless of how well he does. They pulled him off the 2 Grand Prix. Like, you're not giving him a shot to actually get over these gremlins, get to some tracks he actually knows, and get on top of this car, which Max is struggling with as well. And it's the least competitive it has ever been in that ground effect era. Yes, he's been qualifying last, but it's when that car was by far the best. Well, you have to then adjust expectations. Getting into just Q2, but Max is putting it on pole is just as bad as Max qualifying, 4th, 5th, and the other driver being on the back. Like, you have to look at it relatively, and I think that's what's been. Yes, Liam has done a terrible job for sure, but also the circumstances I don't think have been there to really allow him to and give him the opportunity to thrive in what is clearly like. Come on, we already knew this with Pierre and Alex and Checo and now Liam. Clearly, it is a car, it's a unique car, it's a one-of-a-kind car that's so sharp, you need time to develop. And Max has grown with that car, that's the thing. He's been at that team since 2016, so of course he's going to be cooking.
Yeah, Max is able to just drive it. I mean, I was watching, like you said, Liam's laps, and it's just, he's actually overdriving it because he doesn't know how to turn the car in. He's struggling to kind of, it's not even just the sharp front end, he's actually struggling with the rear as well, in terms of like into the corner, he's struggling so much that he's braking way too late. He's trying to push because he's trying to get those extra last tenths, and he's going wide out of the corners. And like you said, it was kind of turn 3 and then turn 9, I think, in China, and that's just carrying him onto the curb. He's losing all of this time, and the rest of it is actually fine. So it's just those kind of little details where he just doesn't have the confidence, and you can't fake confidence, in that Red Bull, especially up against Max, where you're constantly being compared to him. It's always, oh, you're 7 tenths or you're 8 tenths away, in this session. To me, this really reminds me of Pierre Gasly. When I was thinking about what this reminds me most out of the past drivers, this is totally a Gasly situation. But again, with Gasly, he had an opportunity to revive his career because he had a much bigger foundation. He had an entire season at Toro Rosso, and even a little bit in 2017 actually as well, before he got into that Red Bull. And he was kind of able to get back into that Toro Rosso and still have plenty of experience, having that pain of Red Bull. Liam's only been in Formula 1 for 11 races before he, jumped into that Red Bull with all of those circumstances going against him. Difficult car, 2 tracks he doesn't know, all of these things, sprint weekend as well. And it just feels like they had all of the data. They have tested him it's weird because, you know, we have to kind of think back now. Did they give him the right preparation? Was it really worth it to give him all of this time in the Racing Bulls, or instead would have been better? Ultimately, they didn't know what driver they were going to back at the beginning of 2024. They brought Ricciardo in because they guarantee. I think Red Bull. I think if Ricciardo did what Yuki did to Ricciardo, 100% he is in that Red Bull right now because they wanted Ricciardo to work out. And so because they didn't know what driver they wanted, they couldn't give even Liam the right preparation because in hindsight, would it have been better to just put Liam out of Formula 1 in 2024, but give him the entire season constantly testing, just like Antonelli, in the Red Bulls, even if it is the past Red Bulls, for him to learn at so many different racetracks what this car is like to drive. But it's just poor planning, isn't it?
Yeah, like 100%. I think, you know, I agree with the Gasly comparison. The difference is at the time with Pierre, this seat wasn't considered cursed because Ricciardo was doing a very, you know, good job. Max was the better driver in 2018, no doubt, but Ricciardo was up there and close, and it was competitive. So when all of a sudden Ricciardo's out, Gasly's in, your point of comparison is how Ricciardo was doing, and Gasly was nowhere near. So it's like it was very easy. And when my first video with my channel, like I was very much like, yeah, it probably is the right call. They've given him 12 races, which isn't many. Turns out 2 is a lot smaller than 12. and that's the thing. We now have that knowledge of what happened to Pierre and the driver he has gone on to become, what happened to Alex and the driver he's gone on to become, the driver Perez was prior to going into that Red Bull, and how that Red Bull car made him look. And the fact that we're getting 2 races in and it's the same old nonsense again with Liam, it's honestly, mate, it's baffling to me. Like there must be other things going on. Like this decision has happened. If Suzuka's round 5 or 6, this doesn't happen till round 5 or 6, as far as I'm concerned. And to say what was said, do you think
pressure
beforehand,
from Honda, just that little bit of an incentive,
mate,
like
100%. I don't know if you've seen the video from Kim Illman. He was kind of one of the first people to kind of talk about it, and he's obviously got a lot of connections inside. And you know, they're talking about figures like Honda pays, according to Kim anyway, they pay like 10 million a year for Yuki to be in the Racing Bulls, and I guess they sensed an opportunity. Yuki's got new management now as well, so like, you know, I mean, Yuki wanted that seat, and they've sensed a chance, and maybe that management switch from Yuki has already paid off for him because it's got him in the top seat. Now, obviously, whether this works out for him, I'm sure we'll get into it, is another matter, but Yuki's got what he ultimately did deserve in the first place. It's just crazy to me that, look, if you're going to make the decision on Liam, you need to, like, if you're gonna take, like you've got to stick by it. You've made your bed. You've got to lie in it. And I feel like they've now robbed Yuki of a pre-season testing setup to give him. I don't know about you, man, but like, I think this is going to be. I don't think Yuki's going to be much better. I really don't, because they've given him F-all preparation. That's the thing. Like they're setting him up for failure. And Liam, they've not given him enough time to get through these 2 really difficult, tricky weekends where, again, foreign tracks to him and weird conditions in a sprint race. What we did, like Suzuka would have been the perfect track to measure him because he's raced there in Super Formula, he's raced there in F1 and beaten Yuki there in F1 as well. He knows Suzuka like the back of his hand, and he'd get full FP1, 2 and 3, and they've pulled the rug out from underneath him. It's crazy.
So just the last one on Lawson. Obviously, we've seen the blueprint of drivers like Carlos Sainz, who never even got into the Red Bull. He jumped ship way before he even got that seat. Gasly is kind of the archetype of how you can revive your career. Albon to a lesser extent because he spent a year out of Formula 1, which Lawson is kind of staring down the barrel of that situation potentially in 26. Where does he go from here? Because, you know, he is a talented driver. I'm not going to accept any kind of, Lawson is useless, this, that, and the other, because he came in under 2 very difficult situations in 23 and 24 with a minimal preparation and was able to perform very well. So he's back in the funny thing is, he's back in a really good situation. The Racing Bulls is rapid. The Racing Bulls team is absolutely incompetent, but that's another story. But he is back in a really good car that's clearly got quite a nice balance. Hadjar liked it, Tsunoda liked it. He's only got 22 races now to repair his reputation, because those seats for 26, first of all, he has no future at Red Bull. Let's get that straight. He's never going to go back in that car again. He's got to find a way to get into another team and restart his career in the same way that those other drivers did. There is not a lot of spaces for 26. So I think we've got a quality driver in Lawson, massively motivated because his career is on the line, in a really good car as well. I honestly wouldn't even be surprised if he somehow outqualifies Yuki and even scores points in Suzuka. Like, it wouldn't even be a surprise to me, because that's what that car and that driver should be capable of.
Yeah, and again, if we're looking at cars from best to worst and trying to account for drivers, you know, again, Max is maximising that Red Bull. I think that Red Bull is the 4th best car, because I think drivability has to come into it, right? And when it's a car has to be minus points if it's so undrivable and it's operated in such a window that even Max is struggling with it. And Racing Bull's probably, it doesn't reflect in the constructors because they can't do strategy, but they've only got 3 points, but they should. Yeah, look, that's I think the 5th / maybe 6th quickest car. So you've got Red Bull 4th quickest, that's 5th or 6th, so it is tight anyway. And I just think, I agree. I think Lawson's future, now that's kind of done, what he needs to do is just get back into a car that he performed, I think, very favourably in last year. He did a very good job and put himself in the shop window. Like, I guess you kind of say the same about Jack doing with Colapinto lurking. Maybe this will help out Jack because there's talk of Colapinto going to Red Bull. Obviously, Arvid Lindblad's on the way up as well. These are extra factors. Even if Lawson drives well, if they see no future for him for that Red Bull seat, there's no reason to keep Lawson when you want to get Lindblad in. We know there's a lot of belief in Lindblad and maybe Colapinto, who knows, right? We know there was talk about that before he started crashing last year. So I think I really feel like I did some content with Liam last month.
I know, honestly, mate. I've just been watching all of that you've been releasing it, and as all of this has been happening, I just feel both really sorry for you and him.
And you know what's bad? It was like when we first posted it, when I first posted mine, and then Red Bull posted one of the bits we shot, and I kind of made a joke because I was like his race engineer for this bit around China, funnily enough. And my comment, and I kind of removed it afterwards because I felt bad, but this was before China, after Australia, was like, if you want to finish P20 or lower, hit me up, I'm your race engineer. like self-deprecating about myself. And then he qualified P20 twice around China, and I was like, oh no.
So what you're trying to say is that this is all your fault, not Helmut Marko, not Red Bull. It's actually there we go. We cracked it. End of the video. Cut it there. No, it's tough. Man. Again, like I said, I really felt for you. But that's why I told you. That's why I said he's got 22 races to save his career. He's not going to be in that team next year because they'll have Hadjar, they'll have Lindblad, as long as Lindblad has an okay Formula 2 season. So he is out for next year. He needs to capitalize, and it's all down to him. Bear in mind, right?
Lindblad already has the super license points, so
yeah, he's been tearing it up in Asia, hasn't he? He's been winning. I think it was in New Zealand or Australia that he's been racing. Yep. So, but now let's move on to the boy, that rough diamond that we've been backing for the longest.
Bro, for years. Our investment in Yuki Coin, mate, is like, come on, we are original investors.
The thing is, people are jumping ship now, and understandably so, because listen, I'm deluded, okay? I'm a big Yuki fan. I'm actually kind of convincing myself that this is going to go really well and he's going to be super competitive, and I'm kind of going into it with that mindset, but it's going to be super tough. I mean, in terms of what we talk about challenges that he's about to face, I mean, super difficult car to get used to. A brand new car. He's driven it once in Abu Dhabi. That doesn't mean anything. That's a completely different tractor to Suzuka. New team as well, by the way. All of these things that, for example, we were talking about Lewis. Oh, he's got to get used to, a new race engineer. All of these things. Yuki's got to do it now over the course of a race weekend. He's got his home Grand Prix in Suzuka. That in itself is just pressure with all of these fans, all of these expectations. And then another one is that, let's just face it, this team didn't want him there. He's going into such a difficult situation with the car, the track, the situation, with a team that he knows didn't have faith in him. So how does that combine into a good weekend for him? I have absolutely no clue. If he pulls off a point-scoring finish, he might be the GOAT, like, honestly.
Yeah. Look, I would, every fibre of my being would love to be wrong about this and would love Yuki to jump in, duck to water, nice Q3. It doesn't have to be high Q3 because, again, it's 4th quickest car, right? But just get to Q3, do his business like he has.
Put it like 7th or 8th on the grid.
Mate, that's a win. That's a win, right? Knowing where this car is and knowing how that gap's been. Not even with, Checo was very, very capable of getting knocked out way before Q3, right? So, and that's when that car was more competitive than it is now. So, I think you take that. Look, for me, you have to look at the evidence, right? And I want to follow my heart, but I've seen way too many people this morning already posting, what if Yuki outqualifies Max in Suzuka? It's not happening. It's not happening. And there's no evidence we know that Racing Bulls that car does not prepare its juniors for the Red Bull seat. If anything, that junior team prepares its drivers better for other seats, like Sainz, like Albon, like Gasly, right? That it does a better job of preparing. Yeah, and in terms of like, it's clearly the jump that how unique that Red Bull car is. It's an outlier amongst the other 9 cars on the grid, because we're not seeing these gaps between teammates. So I think we've seen how good Alex is and Pierre is and Perez is. We see how good Yuki is, but in that car, that didn't matter. Pierre wasn't good enough. Alex wasn't good enough. Checo wasn't good enough. And I mean, we got a brief insight to Liam. I think after 11 Grand Prix, I think he did quite well. Like, that first race in Zandvoort, when he outqualified Max in Singapore, like Austin, was it, when he had a really good race as well. Like, Liam's very competent, very, very capable, and the car made him look like a mug. And I see no logic. Give me some logic outside of Yuki being the only junior who's had multiple seasons at the junior team before getting promotion. That's the only unique part of Yuki's situation, because Pierre had a year and a little bit, Alex had 6 months, Lawson had 11 races. Like, that, give me some logic to hold on to believe that this is going to be any different, because right now I'm not seeing any.
I think my logic would be that, in a weird way, he's actually going into that team under the best mental circumstances out of any of the other drivers, in the sense that he's had all of this experience. He doesn't necessarily have all of the baggage of, say, Daniel Ricciardo. He has more experience than, for example, Lawson had going into that team, and he has nothing to lose as well. So as much as the circumstances are terrible, the mental aspect of him going into that team with absolutely nothing to lose, because let's get it straight, he was out of the Red Bull family at the end of this year anyway. So he's kind of going with, again, nothing to lose. Like, it can only go either really well for him or exactly as bad as it went for Lawson, because it can't get any worse. I mean, you can't finish 21st in a 20 car grid, although I'm pretty sure Valtteri Bottas managed it a few years ago in the championship. So it's tricky. That's the only thing that I can kind of latch onto with Yuki, that yeah, mentally I think he's at peace with the fact that this is his one chance. This is exactly what he's been preparing for over the past 5 years, and that's about as much as I can give you. Again, it's Bernie Collins on Sky said something that just kind of clicked with me, in the sense that Red Bull are preparing maybe even Yuki and all of their drivers in the wrong way. Maybe it's not time in Racing Bulls. They just need to see which drivers have that front bias characteristic with their driving style, and maybe choose their drivers on top of that. Supplement them with experience, because leaving them in Racing Bulls is just not doing it. So Yuki is a fresh slate. But
that's the problem. That's the hole that's the corner they've backed themselves into, that they have to have such a unique approach to scouting drivers for their top team. All the other 9 teams, including Racing Bulls on the grid, don't need to look at it from that point of view. They just need to look at who's competitive, who's proven. They've tried the junior approach, they've tried the experienced approach, and neither has worked. So Red Bull need to make sure that for this 26 car and onwards, they're not backed into the same corner, because they can't rely on Max being there forever. Without Max, they are up a creek without a paddle. Like, they are absolutely buggered without him. And if he goes to Aston or Mercedes, then it's a big problem. And look, I think, I know a lot of people have said, this could kill Yuki's career. I like to think that the other teams on the grid will look at this situation and acknowledge that, right, your performance in the Red Bull is not indicative of your performance necessarily in what it'll be in our car, because we've got so many examples now of Alex and Pierre, again, being the ones who are now, I mean, I'm loving Alex doing bits at the moment, obviously, of course I am, right? And he's like doing it. Of course, man, look, it won't last, all right? Science will come back, of course he will. He's far too talented to not come back. But like, I'm enjoying it, right? And he's I think he's proved a lot of people wrong. And I think Gasly's done the same. He's done an impeccable job in that Alpine over the years he's been there. And Perez did a fantastic job before he was in the Red Bull. So I think the other team principals and the people making these decisions on Yuki's future and whether or not to sign him, whether this Red Bull, even if this Red Bull stint stinks, I don't think they will look at how he started with Racing Bulls and his time at Racing Bulls. I think if I was a team principal and Yuki stunk, I would still hire him. I don't care how bad he stinks at Red Bull, because we've seen how good he can be and how well he started this season. So I wouldn't worry too much from that point. I think that takes a bit of pressure off, and I hope Yuki's looking at it from that point of view.
I was going to say, kind of the last thing I wanted to talk about Yuki with is what happens if it goes exactly as it did with Lawson, because they can't drop him. Like, they've literally boxed themselves into a corner where, I guess that's another kind of positive in a weird way for Yuki, is that if he's constantly last, then there's nothing that the team can do. Like, I mean, they can't put more pressure. They put quite a bit of pressure on Lawson quite quickly, because over China, Christian Horner was so, like, indecisive. He was not answering any questions. He was like, he was being asked flat out, are you going to drop Lawson? What's going on with Lawson? And he's just like, yeah, pressure Formula One. Yeah, we're going to look at it. So he can't do that with Tsunoda, because there's no plan. Where are they? Plan A, B, C. There's no plan Z, for them. They're literally out of options. So I guess they can't even put pressure on Yuki anymore if it doesn't work out. So that's another positive for him. But yeah, it's going to be a tricky one for Yuki. But the only thing that I'm hanging on to is that the guy had nothing to lose. He was out. There's not that many seats available for next year. I think Cadillac would have been, without the Red Bull stint, maybe Cadillac would have been a good one. I was really hoping he could get into that Aston Martin with the Honda connection, but Stroll is kind of deciding to perform out of nowhere after 8 or 9 years. Stroll is now finally a Formula One driver, or decided to turn up. So yeah, it just looks like Yuki was in a dead-end situation, and Red Bull have thrown him a lifeline, even if it's like the worst lifeline in Formula One, being Verstappen's teammate in that Red Bull. So nothing to lose for the guy.
Yeah, I'd agree that Yuki's safe in that seat till the end of the year, because, like, again, this 26 car is going to be, the first Red Bull car for a very, very, ever, that doesn't have Adrian Newey's fingerprints on it. It's going to be
since the very first one in 2005.
Literally, right? It's been a long time. So, and they will hopefully have learnt from the mistakes, and because they can't just rely on Max now. It worked for them for the longest time. He was winning the constructors essentially on his own. They know they can't do that going forward, because McLaren they've had their resurgence. Ferrari are up there. Aston want to be there. Everyone there's a good argument for a lot of teams being up there and competitive. Williams even as well. So I think that seat's safe, because if you give Yuki 10 races and then put Hadjar or Lindblad in, you're just going to mess them up. Like, there's no point. You might as well, if Lindblad's the future and you do want to put Lindblad in, right, and bypass the junior team entirely, then, which, I mean, I wouldn't put it past Red Bull, but you don't put him in that car this year, because there's no point. Like, all you do is mess with his confidence. You focus on, right, what is this 26 car with a 50-50 and the different aero, less ground effect, active aero, all that. So yeah, I agree that Yuki is safe in this seat for now. And look, I'm annoyed at Red Bull, because it's like they've not given Liam a proper shot, but also they've robbed Yuki of having a proper prep, and that is they've massively compromised. Going for, you go one or the other in this situation, as far as I'm concerned, and they've half-assed it. And again, how much Honda have been involved in this, and I'm super happy for Yuki, man, because I feel like we've been in the trenches at times over the years, especially in 21 when he was just crashing left, right, and centre.
That was tough.
It was tough. But we saw the potential, didn't we, Adas? We did see that potential and kept at it, and he's finally come good, and he absolutely merits the opportunity. No doubt. It's just the way it's gone about is absolutely out of pocket. But come on, Yuki, please.
Yeah. Listen, I mean, Yuki coin is at an all-time high at the moment, and I'm just enjoying it. But like you said, they had two options, and in a weird way, they chose a third one, which was the worst one. It's just crazy. So, I mean, what does this now say then for Red Bull as a whole? Forget their drivers. They're being scapegoated. Whatever happens, I don't care. Who's in that car. What does it mean for this team as a whole? Because I believe even you talked about this, and I think the race talked about it. Like, this was negotiated in Dubai, like with the Thai owners now. Upper management, not even upper management, the owners of Red Bull, not Red Bull Racing, like the actual company getting involved. That speaks to a bit more of, I want to say, friction within the company. So, I mean, this is, what does this say about Horner and Marko? Because they had all of the data, they had all of the chances throughout 2024 to prepare one driver. Forget the fact that they had three, one driver to prepare them for this seat. Maybe even Perez, maybe even he could have saved his seat. And they have absolutely screwed it up royally.
Yeah, I can't remember the quote exactly from Jos Verstappen about the team will descend into chaos. And I mean, it's just that the look it's such a bad look. And obviously, like Charlie Muvidja, who owns the 51% stake in Red Bull GmbH, lives in Dubai, and they had this meeting and they came to this decision. Again, Honda would have been at the table, Yuki's management would have been at the table pushing for him, because Yuki does have that support behind him, which Liam ultimately doesn't have. He's got various sponsors, but they're fairly small time relative in New Zealand. So Yeah, I mean, the division, whether it's division over Max and his future, division over that second driver decision, it is ultimately like Red Bull, you know, for so long were the bridesmaid when Mercedes were winning, never the bride. And they've got themselves this opportunity and they came out the gates flying, and it's just, it's crumbled in a very, very public way. And I don't know, mate. Honestly, I'm not sure. Like, something has to change. Like, either Horner or Verstappen, because you've got the team Verstappen and the Dutch side, and Marko. You probably put in that as well. And then you've got Horner, who has the kind of loyalty of the Uvidges, as far as we understand. Hence, you know, why he's, you know, essentially still in his position. And I mean, while you've got these two. You've got McLaren working as a really well-oiled machine, and Zax and Andrea have built a really solid foundation there. Fred, I think, is doing a fantastic job at Ferrari. You know, Kimi Antonelli coming in, and who knows about Jim Ratcliffe, right? But Toto seems to be allowed the autonomy to run that team in the direction he wants. And Aston Martin investing big time. Vowles gives so much confidence in Williams. Maybe Alpine are on the resurgence. Like, this. Red Bull will fall backwards. They will fall. Like, is this a video from the race I was watching? They mentioned, like, could this be the start of a McLaren-like slump where they were fantastic and then they just had years of, because they're not cohesive, and with such fine margins at the top, yes, the accordion effect will be a thing, but Red Bull were building their own powertrain for the first time ever as well.
That's tough. I think people cannot underestimate that sort of challenge, building your own power unit, and unlike in previous years. So even during the early hybrid era, yes, that they had a bad power unit with Renault, there was that horrible relationship, but they always had Nui. The chassis was always good, you know, around those kind of Monaco, Singapore tracks. They were kind of, and Hungary as well, they were competitive around those tracks. Like, they don't have Nui anymore. They're struggling with the balance of their chassis. Yes, they've got the, you know, the handling characteristics sort of that Max likes, but again, the balance issues are there. So we are seeing, I think all of this started at the beginning of 2024, even when they were dominant in those first like 5 races, because the team was already beginning to come apart with like the Horner investigation, and then Jos Verstappen having those, you know, comments that he's tearing the team apart. And it started the cracks. They were able to patch it up. You know, Horner got the Avidias on his side, but this sort of situation and this sort of just disaster class in decision making and poor management, it opens up the opportunity for a power grab. You know, who's going to come into that team and potentially say, I can do a better job than what's going on right now? I know that Horner is the CEO, but it only takes that little bit of tension between him and the Uvidges, and he's potentially out. We know that Marko has the support of Verstappen, but if Max decides to leave, I mean, like you said, if Max decides to leave today, this team is battling with Saubers to not crash into the gravel. Like, just imagine that. That's how bad this team is right now. So Max has all of the power because he's the only one keeping this team together, and that is such a dangerous situation to put yourself in. At least in the past, they had, you know, Vettel and Nui, you know, 2 different forces, 2 different people kind of pushing the team forward. Now it is only Max because the technical department just hasn't been up to it. So what does that say about the future of this team, a potential power grab, and how important it is to keep Max Verstappen? I mean, I can't believe it.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. They're so vulnerable. Like, even when, you know, Lewis was, you know, convincingly beating Bottas, you know, Bottas would still out-qualify him about a third of the time, and you know, Schumacher, Barrichello. I don't remember, even in these clear 1-2s, the discrepancy we're seeing between Max and that, because this car is such an absolute diva to drive. And again, it's moved in this direction, and they backed themselves into a corner, and it worked for the longest time. But when it doesn't work, it's like, you even go back to like middle of 23 when Checo was complaining about the car, and they didn't listen. And you can, you know, understand at the time, you know, if you in such a convincing position, and 23 was his most dominant season of them all. So why would you? I guess, but short-sightedness for sure. I think, I mean, the future is I don't know. I don't know what you think, man. Like, how in terms of decision making going forward, 26 onwards, like assuming Yuki doesn't get up to speed in this car, assuming Max entertains, you know, an Aston Martin, because obviously if he knows that Newey can build a car that works for him, and as soon as Newey's, surely there's a correlation to Newey leaving and this extreme downwards, right? I know it's not necessarily 1-to-1, but like, Aston Martin must feel like quite a compelling, like you say opportunistic, right? I think Honda opportunistic with this opportunity to get Yuki in. I think now with all this going on, Lawrence Stroll needs to be harrying Team Verstappen more than ever, because that is the partnership. That's the link up that I think makes the most sense for me. And it puts Red Bull in a really compromised position.
Yeah, the Mercedes thing is tough because after all the money that they spent on Antonelli, surely they can't drop him. And surely that means Russell's got to go, but Russell's having a fantastic start to the season. He's never even had a chance to fight for the title. So yeah, bit of friction there. But I know that, Toto Wolff is going to do handstands, like he said, to try and get Max Verstappen. So yeah, Max has, apart from Ferrari and McLaren, he has, his pick of whatever team he wants to go to. Maybe Sauber. But it's a
Flavio at Alpine.
Yeah, Alpine. Brilliant. Him and Flavio. But I think it's just tough because, yeah, where's the future for this team? They're boxed in with no alternatives. They don't have any other drivers. All of the other drivers are locked in. And you talked about like a historical precedent. Again, something I talked about in my video. When you look at the great dynasties, Prost, Senna, McLaren, there was a smooth transition of power to Mika Hakkinen. They brought him in. The team kind of, they had a few dips because the car was not good, but they had the driver there. Same with Schumacher. Barrichello was always there, and then Kimi Räikkönen immediately there to replace Michael Schumacher. They immediately win titles in 2007. Same with Mercedes. There was that smooth transition from kind of Lewis, George in between, and now Kimi's there as well. So it's not impossible. Max Verstappen is a great driver, no doubt about it, but we have seen other all-time greats not be superseded in the next kind of era, but a smooth transition of power to another driver who can at least lead the team. And Red Bull have just screwed this up royally. They haven't backed experienced drivers. They didn't even want Carlos Sainz because of, I think there was a bit of tension between the Sainz and the Verstappen family, which in itself I think is an issue that they should have gone on top of. They didn't want someone like Hamilton or Alonso because they were scared, I'm guessing, of like the combination of, Verstappen with those two drivers. So, but they're also not supporting their young drivers. So I don't know what they're doing. And to me, like the final point I want to make is that I want to see how the 2026 engine turns out, how this Red Bull power unit, because that might save their ass if they're like really good. But if it doesn't, then I think there needs to be a fundamental change with either Horner or Marko. I think this team needs an all-new era with an all-new management, an all-new philosophy, because even when it comes to Helmut Marko, when you actually dig down to it, in the past 15 years, he's basically brought in three drivers who have had extended success at Red Bull. Vettel, Ricciardo, and Verstappen. That's not good. That is not a very good hit rate whatsoever. So something needs to change about the general philosophy of this team and how they go about making the decisions on the driver side and also on the technical side as well.
Yeah, I think we said this earlier, like not preparing your drivers appropriately for the specific nuances of that Red Bull. This junior, but they've gone, oh, it's a sister team. Oh wait, no, it's still a junior team. Like, what is it? What's the job of that team? Because you're already getting great marketing exposure with that amazing livery at the front of the field that it has been almost consistently for the entire ground effect era. What is the job of that other team? Is it to prepare your drivers? When they first bought Minardi, in which, credit to Red Bull for putting their hand in their pocket, saving everyone's jobs. And again, a lot of credit to Red Bull for, the young driver system gets a lot of criticism and a lot of it's fair because it is tough, but also it has given a lot of drivers the financial backing that they need to just have a career in motorsport. I'm not just talking about Formula One, right? Outside of F1 as well. There's a lot of drivers that can credit that, and that deserves. But ultimately, that's a money backing thing. At the end of the day, what is the purpose of that second team? The strategy with that second team has been on and off. It's been crazy. That has really hindered matters. And again, they have just, they've seen the light and they've been following it. And Max has been winning and they've got complacent in other areas, and now it's biting them. 26, the good thing for them is 26 is a new opportunity, refresh. Again, new car with Washer at the wheel instead of Newey. Let's see what happens there. Will it be an engine formula? Will it be V10s in 28? Maybe. That'd be nice. I think 26... you know what? Imagine if they had extended these regs and these regs were going for another 2 years, then there'd be a real problem. There'd be a real problem right now. Fortunately for Red Bull, that opportunity for a full reset, they need to take it. They need to take it because this. Look, you can look back on this. They will look back on this ground effect era as a success. Ultimately, they will have to. They might not win the Drivers' Championship this year, but otherwise they've cleaned up drivers. Only McLaren got the constructors, and they might get it this year again as well. But they need to learn from their mistakes because they've made a lot of them.
I think when you win 4 drivers' titles but only 2 constructors' titles, sometimes the simplest explanation really is just the obvious one, which is that they have not done a good enough job on their drivers. You know, I think the death of Dietrich Mateschitz also played into that as well. It just brought even more instability into that organization. I'm not talking about just the race team. And yeah, this era is going to be judged as a success because of what Max has achieved, not necessarily Red Bull, in my opinion. So yeah, I think any more to say? I think we've hit on all of the big topics. I mean,
yeah, I mean, seeing this Christian Horner statement, yeah, I mean, look, it's mad. It is mad. I don't know. Like, I guess question to you: do you think where is it in this statement? Basically saying that, you know, this decision is almost to protect Liam in a way. Do you think pulling him protects him? Because I think that's absolute nonsense, personally.
No, it's just destroyed his career at Red Bull. Like, the irony of what you just said is that it's actually the opposite. It doesn't protect him. It completely destroys him. Protecting him actually would have been to totally going into Japan, Horner saying, we know he's struggling, but he is not the problem. The car is the problem. That would have protected him. That would have given him at least half a season. You know, him going to the media and saying, don't look at Liam. Look at our car. We have got to do better. Liam is a good driver. We know how good he is. That is what would have protected him. By backing him, by dropping him after 2 races, they've killed his career at Red Bull. And now he's got to, and now given, because of how little seats there are for 2026, they've put him under massive stress to kind of sort out his career for the next 2-3 years. So it's just, yeah, that is just hot air. We
have a duty of care to protect and develop Liam. That's bar for bar what he said, and he's kind of echoing what he said before. It's almost like I know. I feel like this statement is a spin to try and be like, oh no, we still believe in Liam, but you're pulling him after 2 races. Like sorry, there's no PR spin you can put on this one, Red Bull, I'm afraid.
Yeah, it's a Red Bull disaster class on so many levels, but at least they have Max Verstappen for now. I think we're going to wrap this one up. It has been a crazy, I want to say crazy few weeks, but this is just normal Red Bull. This is standard affair for the last half a decade of Red Bull racing. So can't wait to see Yuki dropped probably before Monza. You know, Daniel Ricciardo or Valtteri Bottas back in. I'm calling that right now. So yeah, knowing Red Bull, that's probably
Hakkinen back from his sabbatical.
All of those drivers are on the table when it comes to Red Bull. So yeah, Tomo, thanks for coming on, and we need to make this a bit more of a regular occurrence, because when me and you talk, it's always fun.
We got 42 minutes, flew by, mate. Let's do it again, definitely.
Exactly. Cheers, mate.